Sergeant David Pierce thought he had seen everything during his time in space. He had fought dangerous enemies, handled broken weapons, and solved many problems. But nothing had prepared him for the strange case of the dying plants in the Alterion Royal Garden. The beautiful blue flowers that covered the palace gardens were turning black and crumbling to dust. This had never happened before in the long history of the Alterion Empire. These flowers were special. They helped clean the air and provided energy for the entire palace. Without them, the whole building would shut down in just a few days. "Day 7, said Ambassador Harrison, wiping sweat from his face as they walked through the withering garden. 7 days since this started. The Alterions are getting very worried." Pierce looked at his dress uniform and tried to look professional. The Alterion Empire had asked for human help because they trusted Earth's scientists. But Pierce was starting to think that no one knew how to solve this puzzle. "Sir," Pierce said carefully, "maybe we should think about this differently. What if the plants aren't sick? What if something else is causing this?" Ambassador Harrison pointed toward the main garden where Alterion scientists, royal gardeners, and worried palace staff surrounded the dying flowers. "Pierce, they have machines that can read every molecule in those plants. If there was a simple answer, don't you think they would have found it by now?" That was a good point. The Alterions had amazing technology. They could travel between stars, talk across the galaxy instantly, and build palaces that floated in the air. If they couldn't fix their own garden, something very strange was happening. "Has anyone asked the gardeners what they think?" Pierce asked. They brought in 3 teams of plant experts, 2 cultural advisors, and someone who studies plant psychology. Also, a priest, a weather expert, and what I think was a musician, though the translation might have been wrong. Pierce watched through the garden's clear walls as Empress Lurlith walked among the dying flowers. Her skin markings, which usually glowed bright blue, were dim with worry. The Alterion royal family was known for their beauty and grace. But 7 days of watching her beloved garden die had left the Empress looking very tired. "The flowers look healthy in some spots," Pierce observed. "They look healthy, but they're dying anyway," Ambassador Harrison said as another section of flowers turned black before their eyes. "And it's spreading faster each day. I'm starting to think this might be some kind of attack." A new person entered the garden. Dr. Valani, the chief science advisor, had her pointed ears flat against her head. This meant she was either thinking very hard or wanted to run away. She walked up to Empress Lurlith with a data tablet and clearly bad news. "The tests show nothing wrong," Dr. Valani said in careful galactic standard. "The flowers' roots are perfect. Their growth patterns are normal. Their genetic code shows no signs of disease. Then why are they dying?" Empress Lurlitha's voice carried the kind of desperation people have when they've tried everything and nothing works. "We do not know, Your Majesty." Pierce felt something twist in his chest when he saw how defeated the Empress looked. He had seen that expression before on people who had run out of hope. It was the same look his neighbor had when her vegetable garden died from some unknown problem. "Maybe they need something different," he suggested, then immediately wished he hadn't spoken when everyone turned to stare at him. Ambassador Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Different? My neighbor's garden started dying like this once. Turned out the soil needed something it wasn't getting. Sometimes plants die because they're missing something simple, not because they're sick." Pierce realized he was explaining gardening to a room full of diplomats and alien experts. Or maybe something in the environment changed. Plants are very sensitive to changes. "Sergeant Pierce," Ambassador Harrison said slowly. "Are you saying that the royal garden is dying because it needs different care?" I'm saying that maybe it's reacting to something everyone else is missing. Plants don't usually die this fast unless something major changed in their environment. Dr. Villani's ears perked up with interest. You have experience with plant cultivation? Some. My family had a farm. I learned about growing things before I became a soldier. And what methods did you use when plants showed distress? Pierce felt his face get hot as he realized how strange this situation was. Usually checking the soil, the water, the amount of light. Sometimes testing what's in the air around them. Sometimes plants die because of pollution or chemicals they can't handle. Fascinating. Dr. Villani made notes on her tablet. Human agricultural techniques might provide insights we have overlooked. I don't think that's exactly. Another wave of plant death cut through Pierce's protest. This time it was so fast that several sections of the garden turned black in seconds. Pierce winced and found himself looking toward the center of the garden where the most important flowers were barely hanging on to life. These plants had been growing for hundreds of years and were connected to the palace's main power systems. Your Majesty, Dr. Villani said to Empress Lurlith. Would you allow our human ally to examine the garden more closely? Perhaps his species' perspective might reveal factors we have missed. Empress Lurlith's glowing markings flickered with what Pierce was beginning to recognize as careful hope. You believe human knowledge might help? At this point, Your Majesty, we have tried everything else. A different perspective cannot make things worse. Pierce felt the familiar weight of unexpected responsibility on his shoulders. I'm just a soldier, Your Majesty. I don't know anything about alter-ion plants. But you know something about plants in general, Empress Lurlith said, her voice carrying the kind of desperate hope that made Pierce want to promise he could fix problems he definitely couldn't fix. A little, but I don't want to make things worse. Worse than losing the entire garden? Ambassador Harrison asked. Pierce, I think we've passed the point where being careful is our main worry. The next wave of plant death seemed to spread through the garden's energy network, making the walls themselves flicker as the power system struggled to compensate. Pierce watched Empress Lurlith's shoulders sag with exhaustion and found himself stepping forward before his common sense could stop him. I can try, he said. But I'm not promising anything. Hope, Empress Lurlith said softly, often comes from unexpected places. Pierce nodded and straightened his shoulders, preparing to enter a royal garden where his combat training would be useless and his limited farming experience might somehow save an important diplomatic mission. Just another day in the Terran Alliance military. The Alter-Ion Royal Garden looked like something from a fairy tale, but a fairy tale that was having a nightmare. Crystal pathways wound between flower beds that should have been glowing with blue light. Instead, more and more sections were turning black and crumbling away. The remaining healthy flowers pulsed with weak light, like they were trying to call for help. The sight made Pierce's heart ache. He had always loved growing things, even before he became a soldier. The traditional methods have not worked, Dr. Villani explained as she led Pierce through the garden's various sections. We have tried changing the soil, adjusting the water, modifying the light spectrum, and testing every possible disease. Pierce nodded as if he understood all the technical terms. What about checking what's in the air? The atmospheric composition has remained constant, Dr. Villani said, her ears twitching in what Pierce was learning meant embarrassment. All environmental factors are within normal ranges. But what if normal isn't what they need anymore? Pierce asked. What if something changed that your instruments can't measure? Dr. Villani gestured toward a complex display showing the garden's vital signs, growth patterns, and what appeared to be a real-time analysis of plant health. Perhaps you could observe and provide insights based on your human perspective. Pierce studied the readouts, which told him absolutely nothing useful except that the plants were definitely dying and showed no signs of getting better. Can I actually touch the plants? Not just look at the data? Dr. Valani led him to the main flower bed, which was surrounded by enough monitoring equipment to run a small city. The remaining healthy flowers glowed weakly among dead and dying neighbors, their distinctive blue light flickering like candles in the wind. They're beautiful, Pierce said softly. They are the heart of our civilization, Empress Lurlith replied from her position beside the flower bed. They have grown here for over 1,000 years. They provide clean air, pure water, and energy for the entire palace complex. Pierce knelt down and carefully touched the soil around the plants. It felt perfect, not too wet, not too dry, with a texture that spoke of centuries of careful cultivation. The soil feels good, he observed. All soil analysis indicates optimal conditions, Dr. Valani confirmed. Pierce looked more closely at the flowers themselves. The healthy ones seemed to be reaching toward something, their petals oriented in a specific direction. The dying ones had petals that hung limp and lifeless. Has anyone noticed which direction the healthy flowers are facing? He asked. Dr. Valani checked her instruments. The phototropic responses show normal orientation toward primary light sources. But what if they're not reaching for light? Pierce said, studying the pattern more carefully. What if they're reaching for something else? He stood up and looked around the garden, trying to see it the way a plant might. The healthy flowers were all oriented toward the center of the garden, where a large crystal formation rose from the ground like a natural monument. That crystal, Pierce said, pointing. What does it do? The heart crystal has been the spiritual center of the garden for millennia, Empress Lurlith explained. It focuses and amplifies the natural energy of the flowers. When did you last check if it's working properly? The question hung in the air as everyone in the garden exchanged glances. Pierce realized that all the high-tech monitoring had been focused on the plants themselves, not on the ancient crystal that was supposed to help them grow. Oh, Empress Lurlith said softly. Maybe the crystal isn't providing what the plants need anymore, Pierce continued. Or maybe something is blocking its energy. The plants closest to it are trying to reach it, but the ones farther away are giving up. A disruption in the heart crystal's energy field, Dr. Valani said, her ears standing straight up with sudden understanding. We have been monitoring the plants, but not the energy source they depend on. Exactly, Pierce said, feeling more confident. On my family's farm, we learned that when plants start dying in a pattern, you don't just look at the plants. You look at what feeds them. Princess Zara chose that moment to run into the garden, having escaped from her tutors again. The 3-year-old princess had a talent for appearing whenever something important was happening. Mama, she said, tugging on Empress Lurlitha's robes. The pretty flowers are sleeping. Yes, dear one, the Empress said sadly. They are very sick. Princess Zara walked over to the heart crystal and put her small hands on its surface. Immediately, the crystal began to glow brighter, and several nearby flowers lifted their heads as if waking up. The crystal responds to royal touch, Dr. Valani breathed. But Princess Zara is too young to maintain the connection that the garden requires. Pierce watched as the little princess tried to hug the entire crystal, her small form dwarfed by the massive structure. Where her hands touched, the crystal pulsed with warm light. But as soon as she moved away, the light faded again. She's trying to help, Pierce said softly. But she doesn't understand what's needed. The heart crystal requires a sustained energy connection, Empress Lurlith explained. Traditionally, this was provided by trained royal guardians who could channel their life force through meditation and spiritual discipline. What happened to the guardians? The last guardian of the heart passed away 6 months ago, Dr. Valani said quietly. He was very old and had served for 60 years. We have been trying to train a replacement, but the traditional methods take decades to master. Pierce felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. 6 months ago. When did the plants start showing the first signs of stress? About 6 months ago, Empress Lurlith admitted. But the connection was not obvious until this week when the deterioration accelerated. The plants have been slowly starving, Pierce said with growing certainty. They need the crystal's energy to survive, but without a guardian to maintain the connection, they've been getting weaker and weaker. Princess Zara had managed to climb partway up the crystal and was now pressing both hands against its surface. The glow was stronger now, and Pierce could see several flower beds beginning to respond. But we cannot ask a child to bear such responsibility, Empress Lurlith said, worry clear in her voice. What if she didn't have to do it alone? Pierce asked, an idea forming in his mind. What if someone helped her? The traditional training requires years of study in Alter-Ion spiritual practices, Dr. Valani explained. No human has ever attempted to become a guardian of the heart. Pierce looked at Princess Zara, who was humming to herself as she held the crystal. Her humming seemed to make the light pulse in rhythm with the melody. The flowers near her were definitely getting stronger. Maybe the traditional way isn't the only way, he said. Princess Zara has a natural connection. She just needs someone to help her understand how to use it properly. You would be willing to learn? Empress Lurlith asked. I would be willing to try, Pierce replied. I can't promise I'll be good at it, but I understand taking care of living things. And I know how to stay calm under pressure. Ambassador Harrison's voice came through the communication system. Sergeant Pierce, I'm not sure this falls under standard military duties. Sir, Pierce said, watching Princess Zara successfully bring more flowers back to life through her simple contact with the crystal, I think this is exactly what military service is for. Protecting life and helping allies in need. Dr. Valani was taking rapid notes on her tablet. If Sergeant Pierce could establish a secondary connection with the heart crystal while Princess Zara maintains the primary link, it might provide the stability the garden requires. How would that work? Pierce asked. Royal guardians traditionally worked in pairs, Empress Lurlith explained. One to channel energy, one to guide and stabilize the flow. Princess Zara has the natural royal connection, but she needs someone experienced in focus and discipline to help her direct it properly. Pierce had spent years learning to maintain concentration during combat, to stay calm when everything around him was chaotic, to work as part of a team toward a common goal. Maybe those skills could transfer to this very different kind of challenge. What do I need to do? He asked. First, we must determine if you can establish any connection with the heart crystal at all, Dr. Valani said. Many people cannot perceive its energy patterns. Pierce approached the crystal where Princess Zara was still humming and glowing. As he got closer, he began to feel something, a warmth that seemed to come from inside the crystal itself, a sense of life and growth and ancient wisdom. I can feel something, he said, surprised. Place your hand beside Princess Zara's, Empress Lurlith instructed. Slowly and gently. Pierce carefully put his hand on the crystal's surface next to the little princess's small palm. Immediately, the warmth became stronger, and he could sense the vast network of living energy that connected the crystal to every plant in the garden. But he could also feel the weakness in the system, like a river running low during a drought. The plants were reaching desperately for energy that wasn't flowing strongly enough to keep them alive. Focus on sending your own strength into the crystal, Dr. Valani guided him. Imagine your energy flowing through your hand into the stone, then out to the plants that need it. Pierce had never meditated or done anything mystical in his life, but he understood the concept of giving his strength to help others. That was what soldiers did every day. He closed his eyes and imagined his energy, his calm, his determination, his willingness to protect, flowing through his hand into the ancient crystal. The effect was immediate. The crystal blazed with light, and waves of healing energy pulsed outward through the garden. Flowers that had been black and dead began to show hints of blue again. Plants that were barely alive straightened and reached toward the sky. Princess Zara clapped her hands with delight as the garden around them came back to life. "Pretty flowers are waking up," she announced. Pierce felt a deep sense of rightness, as if he had found something he was meant to do. The energy flowing through him didn't feel draining, it felt like coming home. "Remarkable," Dr. Valani whispered, watching her instruments record the garden's rapid recovery. "The energy flow has stabilized at optimal levels. The healing response is faster than anything in our historical records." "How do you feel, Sergeant Pierce?" Empress Lurlith asked. "Good," Pierce said honestly. "Really good. Like this is what I should be doing." Princess Zara looked up at him with serious 3-year-old eyes. "You help the flowers," she said solemnly. "You're the flower helper." Pierce laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I guess I am." "The garden is responding beautifully," Dr. Valani reported. "But maintaining this level of energy connection will require regular sessions. At least once per day, possibly more during periods of stress or growth." "That's a big commitment," Ambassador Harrison's voice came through the speakers. Pierce looked around the garden, which was now glowing with healthy blue light as far as he could see. Plants that had been dying moments before were stretching toward the sky, their petals bright and their leaves strong. "Some commitments are worth making," he said. "You would be willing to become a guardian of the heart?" Empress Lurlith asked formally. "Yes, Your Majesty. If Princess Zara will work with me, I'd be honored to help protect the garden." Princess Zara nodded enthusiastically. "We help flowers together." "Then let it be so," Empress Lurlith declared. "Sergeant David Pierce, by the authority of the Altarion Crown, I name you Guardian of the Heart, Protector of the Royal Garden, and Guide to the Princess Heir." Pierce felt the weight of the title, but also its rightness. He had joined the military to protect people and preserve life. Now he would do the same thing in a completely different way, by helping a little princess learn to care for the living heart of an alien civilization. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you learn our ways while teaching us yours," Dr. Valani said. "The traditional guardian techniques combined with human agricultural knowledge could revolutionize how we care for the garden. And I get to help Princess Zara understand her connection to the heart crystal as she grows older." "She will need guidance," Empress Lurlith agreed. "Someone who understands both strength and gentleness, both protection and growth." Princess Zara had wandered off to examine some flowers that were blooming with especially bright colors. She called back to them, "Come see. The flowers are happy now." Pierce smiled and followed her, feeling the heart crystal's warm energy continuing to flow through him to the plants around them. It was different from any mission he had ever been given, but it felt like the most important work he had ever done. "Guard duty," he said to himself with a grin. Just a very different kind of guard duty. The garden hummed with life around them, and Pierce began to understand that protecting something didn't always mean carrying weapons. Sometimes it meant learning to nurture and guide and help things grow. Sometimes the best way to serve was to become a gardener. As the artificial sun began to set over the palace, Princess Zara yawned and reached up to Pierce. Without thinking, he picked her up, and she curled against his shoulder with the trust that only children could give. "Tomorrow we help more flowers?" she asked sleepily. "Tomorrow we help more flowers," Pierce promised, looking out over the thriving garden that glowed with blue light under the stars of two different worlds. He had found his calling among the alien flowers and the laughter of a small princess who would someday rule an empire. It wasn't the career path he had planned, but it was exactly where he belonged.